Well, good afternoon, everyone. We are back after lunch. Now we need to open up another section, basically regarding public funding challenges in funding the agriculture sector's digital transformation. We have been talking about private funding. We talked about venture capitals and other types of funding available, and now we will move into this space. For this, we have three speakers. On one hand, we will have William Ernest, the Senior Specialist of IDB Lab. He has been with us all week long, as well as Enrique Hennings, who is with us virtually. He represents IFED Panama for Central America, Mexico, and the Caribbean, and Eduardo Chamali, who is also with us in person here. A Chief Executive Officer of the Digital Agenda at CAP, Chief Officer. In this panel, we will divide this panel into parts. First, a brief presentation or introduction by the three entities, 7 to 10 minutes each. They will refer to their vision regarding digital agriculture transformation and the actions they plan for this, focusing particularly on Latin America and the Caribbean. And then after that, we will have an exchange. And that is why we encourage all those present to take note or for any question or comment, because we want to foster an exchange, a discussion among the people, with the people on this panel. Let us offer the floor to William for his first presentation. So, William, whenever you want to, go ahead. Well, hello, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank ICA once again for the invitation to participate in this Digital Agriculture Week. Allow me to share a bit. My challenge, just as Antonella yesterday, is to keep you all awake after lunch. We hope it doesn't rain like it did yesterday, but I represent IDB Lab, the innovation group of the Inter-American Development Bank Group. We are celebrating our 30th anniversary, 30 years working with the entrepreneurial ecosystem, as you can see on the slide. Well, maybe not. Very likely, you know more about our big brothers. Part of the IDB group, there are three different institutions in IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank itself, perhaps the best known. That one has 60 years of working with governments in Latin America. And yesterday a bit, Federico Torres from MISIT was here yesterday telling us how MISIT Costa Rica is working on agriculture digitalization. So we have a division of natural resources and development, a division that covers technology innovation that support governments in digital transformation, particularly natural resources. Focuses more on agriculture, but competitiveness, technology, and innovation supports all matters of digital transformation. Then we have IDB Invest, a group that works with the corporate part, the corporate group, agriculture corporate groups. They work a lot on value chains. And lastly, ourselves, IDB Lab, and we are the smallest of all three, by far. We place $100 million per year in Latin America and the Caribbean, 26 countries that we work with. 100 million is very little for all those needs, but we work with the entrepreneurial ecosystem. We like to think that the IDB Lab helps the rest of the world to navigate through these difficult waters. We live in this volatile, uncertain world, and we are that instrument that is basically the explorer guiding the rest of the group helping them surf these difficult waters and helping it pivot towards new frontiers, new technologies, new industries, fragile context, climate financing, helping the climate crisis and new mobilization structures. We are instrumental for the group to understand the signals set by the marketplace. Federico has referred these days about EECA's mandate. We also have our mandate. We are a multilateral fund, so we have donors that give us a mandate. The IDB Lab, its donors are the 26 countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, where the IDB operates, and we have extraterritorial donors. The main donor is Japan, and we also have European countries, the United States, Canada. And the mandate given to us, that is summarized here in the priorities, to benefit poor and vulnerable populations, particularly regarding access to essential services and opportunities to generate revenue or income, drive entrepreneurial innovation in early phases, and activate new growth drivers. So we talk about remittances, microfinance, public-private partnerships, venture capital, blockchain, and artificial intelligence. Important here, and I believe that is why we are talking about AgTechs, and later on we will see some of our verticals. And agriculture, natural capital are one of the lines, no doubt. But we see small producers or growers, not as poor populations, but yes, very vulnerable. Vulnerable because of climate change, natural resources. Oftentimes, they are in areas, in remote areas of our geography with limited access to services, to technologies. So we see these as vulnerable populations, and there we believe this is clearly aligned with our mandate. Something else is that we are working in the early phase, entrepreneurialism in early phases, and we will see what our sweet spot is in a moment. These are our verticals, as I was telling you. This is agriculture and natural capital, essential infrastructure services. We could see, for example, connectivity in rural areas, talent and employment. And here, I believe, under talent, and this I have talked about with some of those present here, we have digital skills also included, and how the digital fields, these skills should be spread to the rural areas. Because this is a limitation for producers to join digital transformation. We are coming with solutions, but oftentimes digital literacy is key. Health and financial inclusion, cross-cutting, climate crisis, gender and diversity. Climate crisis is very important in this phase. And we see that aside from having our own resources, we mobilize third-party resources, and there is a lot of interest for climate funds to place these resources in Latin America, but they have this component. And what we seek is to test new technologies and business models, and aside from developing entrepreneurial ecosystems. Our value proposition, well, many of you know us as providers of funding. Well, the bank is among the main funding providers for governments. IDB Invest is also working with corporate in the area of development. But that is not our sole product. As IDB Lab, we provide funding. Before I was mentioning the envelope, we have the annual envelope, but at the same time, we have knowledge and connections. Oftentimes the knowledge products, well, perhaps some 5 years ago, we developed an inventory of the AgTech and food tech solutions available at that time, and we have continuously improved that list. So this is an asset of knowledge for the entrepreneurial area, this vertical element. And we have many projects related to our own projects. We Mac FinTechs, we have Mac Venture Capital, and all those knowledge products are available or can be examined on our website. We have connections also. In the next 2 weeks, we will have the IDB Forum lab at a forum in Bogota, and we have other events also. I believe in the first panel earlier today, we heard about the limited capital that really gets to enterprises headed by women. We have an exchange here. We exchange for companies or businesses headed by women. We provide training, connections with investors, et cetera, et cetera. Now here, we can see the different financing programs for different phases. And we cover all the way from the development of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, prototyping, market validation, early growth. The expansion process, we hope that these scales can be reached through the IDB or IDB Invest or external partners. So here we see a product all the way from ecosystem development. Oftentimes we have countries where we still do not have that entrepreneurial ecosystem where it's in early phases, so we can fund through non-reimbursable funds. And this applies to organizations that want to move that ecosystem. We have several projects we have had projects over the years, and to finance the enterprises, we have prototype testing, which is up to 100 million. We have the Spark projects, contingent recovery when an organization is not yet profitable, but is attractive products from $250,000 to $700,000. We also heard a bit later before about our colleagues from GLAB were talking about the venture capital funds and how these are structured. So we are limited partners in these venture capital funds. So we make investments in venture capital, and this we see through two lines. The Latin American and Caribbean region is one of the regions that do not yet have enough investment in this venture capital, but by being in these venture capitals in the region, we have a good idea of what is happening in entrepreneurial region in the area. And we have a direct investment product. We also invest directly in these startups, and the only caveat is that this is a product. Well, we can see 2 or 3 of these per year, and we are not the lead investor usually. Usually, we leverage our venture capital funds, and they are the ones that help us identify these opportunities. And some of them should be the lead investor, and they invite us to come along. And we have debt products, $500,000 to $2 million. In growth and expansion, we have loans for public policies through the IDB or investments through IDB Invest or others. What do we seek through innovation proposals or propositions? Well, first of all, we seek new technologies and business models, systemic impact, expertise, proven expertise in the subject matter, traction, and the counterpart capacity. The GLAB colleagues were mentioning what it was like to access to some of these resources. They call them impact philanthropy. I like to call them that IDB Lab will work on impact. We know we have impact indicators that we need together to report to our donors to show that theory of change. But at the same time, we like our clients to have a skin in the game. So usually we do not fund the entire project. We wait until the proponent can have that possibility to provide resources in this venture. And lastly, Once again, we have some of the instruments, non-reimbursable resources. Usually what we finance are ecosystem projects that we saw in the previous slide. And the prototype product that we say is up to $150,000. Aside from that, we have resources, although technically they are non-reimbursable. It is a contingency recovery proposal. We accompany the companies that are related to financial as well as impact KPIs, depending on the success of the project. And this grant is paid back. This is this type of grant. We have investments through investment funds and exceptionally through startups and all these types of activities. How to contact us? This is a QR. If you are interested in financing, connection, knowledge, in the QR, you have an access to our form directly. And depending on the geography, etc., we would be contacting you. And I think we still have a few more minutes. So in any case, we can talk about this in the coffee break or what have you. Thank you, William. Thank you very much for sharing the vision of IDB and IDB Lab and the products and services you are offering. Now, let us go to IFAD and Enrique Hennings. He is with us virtually. Can you hear us clearly, Enrique? Yes, of course, perfectly well. Can you hear me? Yes, sir, very well. So the floor is yours. Go ahead. Let me share my screen, please. Let me know if you can see it. Yes, we can see this. Perfect. Well, good afternoon. I will take a bit of your time to make a different presentation. I would like to talk about the offering of products and services that IFAD has, and to talk about the projects we have and how we are helping the digital ecosystem in Latin America. Let me share a recent experience we are just finishing. It is called the Novatech, funded by IFAD and implemented by the Sparkassen the German foundation, to provide financial and non-financial services to small producers and conditions of vulnerability funded by the IFAD projects. To understand the rationale of this investment, we started to analyze the landscape in the region, and we realized there was very limited access by small producers regarding financial and non-financial service offering. There were fintechs and agritechs that had played a crucial role in the recovery of the post-pandemic recovery, but had not fully developed their services at all levels. There was a big concentration of fintechs and agritechs in areas like Brazil, Chile, Mexico, Colombia, and very few in Honduras, Nicaragua, Bolivia, for example, where support was needed for technology, for tech companies to provide services. Considering that many of these businesses that want to expand their services to the rural areas could not find the resources for that change in the type of services to assist the rural population. So that is the rationale behind the investment. So what was sought by this grant? Well, to work in 6 countries: Bolivia, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, and Haiti, reaching more than 900 households, helping more than 260 organizations through 12 startups that were selected out of a pool of 114 applicants and an average investment of $200,000 per business, more or less. But that was basically it. And the importance of this grant was that this was not necessarily acceleration. We just wanted to bring the organizations together with the different other stakeholders through digitalization. As to those that benefit from this type of project, we always seek to deal with the social sector, women, youth, or growers associations in rural areas, and financial institutions dealing with rural areas, and as indirect beneficiaries would be the fintechs and AgTechs that could benefit from this, always focusing on young women and the indigenous populations. In the case of this grant, it was the population affected by COVID. The relevance of this, and this is about to end for a series of different sectors. In agriculture, we improved the offering of digital options. There was greater awareness of the technologies. There was more trust among growers and producers to work with technologies. And this led us to, up to a certain point, close the digital gap between the companies and the projects working on. As to financial services, financial inclusion was one of the biggest achievements. We also trained a lot of the fintech staff and personnel to more efficiently help the rural areas, and we improved the financial services offering. Another big benefit in this sense is to bring all the services of these businesses to the sector, being as we were working within the field. So there was a lot of work done in that area. As to project phases, there was a pilot phase where each business had to work with 4 producers' organizations. It was a massification process first, where each business had to work with 20 producers' organizations minimum. And now that we are in the final phase, we have selected the 5 best, to which we are now helping to be ready to receive capital investment at a larger, higher level line of credit for them to upscale this type of solution to all the projects that that IFAD could have in the countries, or other projects that could make use of this funding. One of the very interesting things that happened in this process, particularly in the pilot phase, was a specific demand study of each producer, and based on this, we detected the businesses that could provide this type of services adequately according to the needs of the producers.
A whole methodology was developed with SMEs to be able to analyze these companies from the financial standpoint, objective, impact perspective, in such a way that they are very well selected, and we choose those that can provide their services but also have the chance to have much success in the future, to escalate up their services. So this was an open call. We chose 2 out of 214, and 100. No, we chose 12 startups out of a pool of 114 requests, and we have the benefit partners, which are the strategic allies, which is a practice with many stakeholders that contributed somehow for this type of donations to be successful. And let me tell you later on the type of products that were generated from this practices. And out of those 12 that were selected, we have 2 per country: AgroDigital in Honduras, Unix and Sembraco in Guatemala, Alfie and Exceso in El Salvador, Nilus and Vercor in Mexico, Oleg Tractor and Tugerente in Bolivia, and Oleg Tractor is also participating in the second week as one of the selected companies by ICA, and we have Haiti Pay and Money Talks in Haiti. And in these companies are already providing services in each country, and they're also participating actively in developing alliances with other companies to improve the type of services that they are providing. And in terms of compliance, we have attained almost 100% of the goals. We are a bit short in terms of the homes to be reached because we're still in the scale up process. But by the end of August, we will be able to attain 100% of the goals. And one of the interesting things that came out of the part of generation of knowledge was the creation of GeoPortal, where we have around 2,000 and some companies between fintech and agritech. And we'll have an update coming up in a few months where we have some more 500 companies registered in 55 countries, so in 45 countries. So we have been able to share the knowledge, and it has been put in the hands of the objective company that we had. And with regards to strategic partners, we have a number of companies that have been working for us from there, the Secretariat of Agriculture in Honduras, that have participated actively. They are assisting with technical assistance and accompanying these companies, and they are helping them to reaching more entrepreneurs. And with regards to benefit partners, we have Amazon Web Service, which have provided the space in the cloud for each of these companies that needed access to other types of services that couldn't be given by the program. So what's coming up? And this is to conclude. So what will happen in the future? We are in the final phase for the preparation of Innovatech, where we'll go from 2 companies to 30 startups that will be dealt with this mechanism. And we're going to include another region, Asia, with 6 countries. And we're going to have some specific financing lines for the part of climate change and ecology. And after Innovatech 2, we will have a permanent financing option for companies that have a rural approach and that want to reach farmers. So with that, I'm done. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Enrique, and thank you for presenting this initiative that allows us to give a practical experience and how this links with other products and services. We ask you to please stay because after CAP's presentation, we will open the floor for Q&A. So now I'm going to introduce Eduardo Chamali, who is the main executive in ITC and in CAP's agenda. So the floor is yours. Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here this afternoon. I am dessert, so hopefully you're not all asleep by now. So thank you very much, Ika, for your invitation. And I'd like to thank the other colleagues here present because this is a very interesting panel because we are dealing with a sector that is key to our socioeconomic systems. And this is CAP's vision as a development bank that wants to be the green bank and for the reactivation of the region. We are talking about a bank that was founded more than 50 years ago, and it integrates 18 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, plus Spain and Portugal, and also 13 private banks in Latin America. We already have around 13 offices in countries. We have hubs in Panama and Montevideo, where I'm located. And from there, I coordinate everything that has to do with digital transformation in a cross-cutting way. Next slide, please. And just to let you know briefly why we're here and why is this an agenda for Latin America. Compared to other multilateral organizations, the digital transformation agenda at CAF is a holistic one, a comprehensive one. We try to incorporate all the different sectors: infrastructure, transportation, logistics, public services, health, education, government, production sectors, of course, the agricultural sector, but we also all have all the value chain related to the production ecosystem of the region. And the idea is to have a cross-cutting vision of how to integrate these digital ecosystems in the countries. And for this, we also provide a sovereign financing that is public or private. In the past 5 years, we have financed projects for $3.6 billion. And what we wanted to mention here is that we monitor the the digital ecosystem in the region. We have more than 200 indicators for more than 150 countries that allow us to compare the region to the rest of the world based on different pillars. As you can see here, digital infrastructure, regulation and public policies, digitalization of homes, digital economy, digitalization of the state, human capital, and green digital economy. So you can see how we have advanced in the past 15 years, leveraging mainly on what has to do with connectivity that has been come mass in terms of mobile technology and networks, public policies that have tried to provide society the use of ITCs, but there's something important that has to do with digital economy. That is how to turn the homes, the production sectors, and the government to use the internet in a productive way. Next slide, please. So this is a priority that we see, and this is a topic that we see constantly. Latin America is lagging behind the rest of the world. And if we were to look at the pillars for the investment of digital infrastructure, where we look at telecommunications and big data, data centers, cloud, Internet of Things, Latin America is investing up to twice, 2.5 times less than other countries of OECD. So it's a gap not only for basic infrastructure and coverage, but also with other technologies, advanced technologies. So in this other slide, you can see the gaps that exist in the cloud. The upper graphs are OECD countries, and the bottom ones are Latin American and CAF countries. So these gaps, as long as they exist, they will not allow us to have intensive use of the digital transformation for the well-being of our countries. The next slide. Here you can see a scenario that shows that the region is adopting digital solutions. And if we were to think 10 years back, we know that we're closer to Internet of Things, cloud, artificial intelligence, blockchain, and 5G. But we're now thinking of how to include pilots in each of the segments, like in the case of Latin America and in the agricultural sector is the one that has the greatest potential of impact as well in terms of logistics and manufacturing. So in agriculture, all the topics related to Internet of Things, to big data, and robotics. Next, please. And how do we respond to the needs of the region from CAF? As you can see, our general strategy has these pillars of action: how to transform digital economies, that is, to have the governments and companies and homes adopting this type of technology, how we can adopt digital governments, how we can include the population in the use of digital technology, and how can this be a way to develop resilience. And this is also a national type of thing, because when you develop national policies, sometimes you don't understand the asymmetries that exist at the national level, particularly in certain territories, and the differences in infrastructure that require some enabling infrastructures that are a barrier between having an impact and not. So what are the enablers? We have connectivity, digital infrastructure, data policy. We have a public policy framework so that everything becomes a reality. And something very relevant would be the strengthening of human capital and skills and digital skills. So it is important to think about artificial intelligence for the generation of employment, for justice, generation of employment, etc. So, next slide, please. What we find here is a case that we applied for the agricultural and industrial sector in the case of Peru. From CAF, we wanted to understand how can we generate a greater impact in countries. So for a country such as Peru, what we did was identify where the value chains in which we have a greater impact and potential to implement digitalization. And the ICA's agro-exporting chain has a number of people related to avocado. And what we did was develop not only looking at the availability of basic connectivity, but the requirements and the inputs in the entire chain, crops, uh, collection centers, transformation centers, transport, logistics, and even exports. We talked not only about the transformation in the sector, but of the entire transportation chain and distribution chain that allowed us to understand methodologically which were the segments and the sectors involved in the countries along the value chain and then have an impact. So here you can see that when you um, pretty much have an idea of what the chain looks like, you can have something for each of the segments. Technologies are there. Technology is not a problem, but technology should not be an end on themselves. We should look at each case individually and see how we seize the different solutions and tools available to generate changes. And here you can see that these may be leveraged by different pathways. You can look at that here. But this in the next slide, you can see that all the technologies available have an impact and solve structural problems in the sector. The lack of water resources generate efficiencies up to 30% with automated irrigation systems. Everything has to do with productivity, the integrated management of the chain to reduce times and losses and mistakes, also the quality of exported products that somehow may allow us to comply with much more strict international regulations, the management of logistic processes, and administrative procedures. So we mapped, in the case of Peru, like you can see in the next slide, the different opportunities that exist both in terms of logistics and in agriculture, and looking at SMEs and large companies. So we can see that even though there was an interesting option of PCs, smartphones, and even connectivity, basic connectivity in some of the cases, when we talk about more advanced things like big data, Internet of Things, and drones, we can see that definitely SMEs are lagging behind importantly. And we need to do this transition between the use of connectivity and the devices with the things that I already mentioned. So the next slide also shows something very important that has to do with the development of capabilities, digital capabilities or skills. We see that there are some difficulties in the percentage of companies that teach digital transformation classes, a number of employees that understand how to use technology in an effective manner in their productive cycles. And all this does not allow us to close this virtuous circle between the use of digital technologies and improvement in production. Now, this is very important, and this is almost to conclude, is the governance model, which is relatively simple. It is easy to understand what were the barriers, where are the gaps and the opportunities. So, but when you look at a project and you're able to create a concept, sometimes you don't see the right governance because you can work at a national level with certain strategy with the production and secretariats and ministries, but if that doesn't reach working groups at the subnational level, be it the trade chambers, uh, industrial chambers, and so on, that will not permeate because we're talking about a national environment that is not clear and how to use all this. So this is key in each case. And to conclude, I just wanted to say that undoubtedly CAF believes that there's a idea to maximize the potential of the digital ecosystem as a development engine. We need to expand 4G, more than 90% of natural of coverage in our region. Now that we have a challenge for 5G, that will probably lead to enabling Internet of Things. We need to analyze that for specific cases. Not everybody needs it. We just need to see this carefully. And as time goes by, as years go by, we do not manage to understand the business models, cases for use, we'll still have greater gaps in terms of competitiveness and productivity. We can also say, well, productivity is being solved nowadays with satellite connections, and that's valid. But we need to understand that for the productive ecosystem, it can work, but not at homes of lowest income. They might not be able to pay $100 for an internet connection. So We have the production sector, but if you have a comprehensive ecosystem, you need to consider the bulk of the population. And this is something that we still need to do. And of course, the part of human capital, as I mentioned before, is critical. We need to strengthen not only for more engineers to be out there, but to be present in all the value chains and all the people who use the technology to use it effectively and for them to adapt their roles to what would be economies of the 21st century. We also need to see how the governments can be an engine and leverage to facilitate this, offering solutions, investing, facilitating procedures, and in giving chances of funding. And finally, we need to see that this is not only a public or private thing in its own. We need to see new opportunities, new financing opportunities. We have development banks, we have local banks, we have the opportunity to think of new models that may allow us to think about scaling up, which is also a recurrent topic. William just mentioned that there are some investments that are smaller that go somewhere between 50,000 to $1 million. But what happens in multilateral banking when you have to have at least $50 million? So how can we scale up initiatives that may be different, add up efforts, and put everything together so that we can reach everybody, not only in terms of finances, but rates and loans for producers. And that is under provision. And that's why in CAP we're working with the digital transformation, in which one of the main topics is going to look for this disruptive models that are being used in Asia, for example. And that will be all for now. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for sharing this information, the requirements, and the lines of work that CAF has. So now we're going to have a Q&A session, taking advantage that we have these three important organizations together here, the IDB Lab, the IFAD, and CAF. So please go ahead, ask questions, make comments. The idea is for you maybe to introduce yourselves briefly so the panel members know who they're talking to. And then if you have a specific question for somebody, just let us know. So the floor is open for questions. Camilo? Good afternoon. I'm Camilo Ramos from Siembraco. Very much for today's agenda. It's been quite rich for all the companies located here when thinking about scaling up our solutions. And I would like to say that Enrique Hennings just received some news that there's going to be Innovatech 2.0. It's been something positive. In 8 months in Guatemala, we managed to do what we did in 3 years in Colombia. And that's because of the comprehensive support that we receive from the program. So I urge you, invite you all to take Innovatech 2.0 into consideration. Aside from the economic support, is the whole support system they give so that you can scale up your product. Thank you. Very well. Now, Camilo, and because I was talking to Enrique, maybe you can give us some details on when it's starting and what would be the Innovatech 2.0 process. Yes, of course, Federico. Thank you very much for the question. As I mentioned before, we are in the final stage of the design of Innovatech 2. Hopefully, everything will be approved and clear by the authorities by September so that we can start working as of the end of this year. So Innovatech is going to finish by June 30th and with the financial close until August. So there won't be, we don't want both programs to overlap. So the idea is to start with that towards the end of the year. It's going to be very similar to Innovatech 1 in the sense that we will update the landscape and the analysis and the look at of the demands of the groups that we would want to serve. And then we will do the call to tech companies that may be interested in changing their business model to be able to reach the group that we want to reach. So That's in process, as I said before, but we will do a call. We will look at the proposals and then we'll continue with the process. And once this year, the program is going to be slightly different, but it will include much more interesting things in terms of training. And thanks to the lessons learned that we had from in Novatech One in terms of training and human capital within the companies in fintech or agritech, or the ones that we will be considering now. So basically, that's it. Thank you. Thank you very much, Enrique. Any other questions from the people here in the room or online? Good afternoon. Mauricio Pintado is my name from Uruguay. And I just wanted to say that a startup, we are currently using some of the tools mentioned by William, about a $700,000 loan that has actually allowed us to grow, not only in factoring, but also our invoicing, and but also some of the commitments that we had in terms of workers and labor that I'll be explaining during my presentation on Thursday. And I just wanted to thank you for thank IDB for the opportunity. We had the luck of being able to join this project that today is a company, and I thank them for their support. We were very lucky, and we have made much progress in many, many aspects. Having IDB support, being able to say that we are a company that is supported by IDB was something very important that has opened many doors to us. And so basically, those were my comments. And just to let you know that it's been truly valuable to us. Thank you, Mauricio. I don't know if William would like to say something about that. Well, I believe that's a spark, right? A contingent. Well, maybe you tell me later. Well, I know this is a new tool. I know that there are very few startups who have had access to this type of financing. It's a loan that has a part of technical cooperation, but I know it's new. That has brought some logistics issues for its execution, but well, we've been able to work with it. We'll talk about it later. But yes, it's a tool that has been out there for a couple of years. Then you can tell me about your lessons learned, please. Okay, thank you very much, both of you. I believe there's another question here. Yes, Honoriana Gomez from UCLTSS, Colombia. My question is, how do you prioritize the criteria and the impact indicators? Because someone might perceive them in a way, like a startup might perceive it differently, and even AgTech startups might perceive them differently. The beneficiaries might perceive them differently, and they are all looking after their own interests. And so it is important to know for us, it'll be important for all the AgTechs here, it'll be important to know this. We have a project with Fontagro and with the University of Zamorano, an alliance by University CIEP, and there was a controversy because in the impact indicators of Fontagre were X number of population in the rural sector that were being benefited, but to me is more than quantity, it's the quality. So they had to lower than the number of people who were going to receive an impact. But it's not a matter of quantity, but quality. And there are many impacts that way. So I would like to know, how do you handle that to say this is an impact is going to be measured this way, this is a threshold, this is maximum, and why? William? Yes, I believe each organization, each impact investor will have a corporate result framework. And there you have some guide indicators. So I don't know how Fontagro works, but for example, in IDB lab for weather issues, we want outcomes. The fact that oftentimes we measure the number of people who will be benefited, we want to know how many people and how they receive the benefit, whether it was in a workshop, in a training, or a transfer, which may be the case. In terms of climate, we are measuring greenhouse effect gases that were avoided. It may be the number of hectares that were adapted to climate change, or something else that's hard to measure, but that was something that was mentioned in the morning session, is the part of the mandate that we have as IDB Lab in terms of improving the conditions of vulnerable poor families in terms of income. And that oftentimes is very hard how income is improved in a family. So those would be pretty much what we measure in rural areas. Those would be our guide indicators. And I believe that during the design process of a project, there's some negotiation going on. And maybe Mauricio can let us know about his experience, but it's a tug war with regards to what a multilateral needs to be able to report to its donors, its mandates, and what you oftentimes can measure.
Just to add, because I would not leave the name of Fontagro sort of soiled. It is not that they said Fontagro is the institution and this is so. No, in the discussion group, the different it was because of the different interests of the different people. I want to be very careful with that. And the other thing is that the important point is that I might have the impression that sometimes we lose the direction because we just focus on numbers and the little nitty gritty. To share CAF's vision, well, the perspective beyond corporate indicators has to do with what I was mentioning before. We want to be partners in developing the countries and their territories. And yes, we do in general establish sort of like a framework with basic indicators. And as you mentioned, there we could have the agricultural population that may be a beneficiary in all of this, but we work based on each project to see which aspects can be focused on. We talk about quality, very important, availability of infrastructure, the impacts on energy efficiency, for example, water resource management, increases in productivity expected, areas not intervened, and they do not have to be binding. And if you did not comply, the program was a failure. No, we set out impact goals, and when we execute a project with a 5-10 year horizon, we set some milestones for the different indicators, and that in fact allows you to determine, first of all, whether this is susceptible to a given impact, and we seek the resources. There is an area in CAF responsible for that, but what we do is build that champion, that case of success that can be scalable. So it is a win-win for both situations. We want to determine how the project is successful and whether it is if it is determined it cannot be achieved or not worth it. And that will lead to lessons learned on each project. And we formulate initiatives with greater impact, which is our objective that we have anyway as Development Bank. Thank you, Eduardo. Enrique, if you have anything to add, just raise your hand or open your microphone. Yes, of course. At IFAD, as all institutions, we have our framework of reference and what we have to report as impacts to our donors And for us, this organization, we always try to align all the indicators in that same direction. But regarding the work we do with startups, and especially, for example, in the case of Innovatech, what we saw was, well, basically the adoption of the service that could be generated for farmers. If farmers adopt a technology that a company brought and they repeat the use over a given time frame, that precisely shows the impact we were seeking. So it really depends on the adoption of services, the repetition of service retention rates, and IFAD is focused on the change in behavior of the people that benefit from a project like this. If there is greater awareness among countries, businesses like RT or companies that have provided technical assistance, focusing more on environmental related activities. So those are the key indicators for us to measure the startups. And something else we tried to do is very clearly set out right from the beginning which indicators we need to know and agree to these with the companies we may be working with, precisely so they do not come across this problem where one measures in one way, someone else measures in the other. No. We clearly discuss this at the beginning to avoid problems and so that both parties always reach their goals. I just wanted to add that. Thank you. Thank you, Enrique. Okay, we have another question here from Gabriel. No more than a question, it is just a comment down the lines that we have been discussing. We are currently executing a project with IDB Lab. There are sister organizations, Paraguay, Uruguay, Bolivia, CREA Bolivia, CREA Argentina, and CREA Paraguay. There was initial definition of the goals, the milestones, the metrics, and the project evolved quite well, although the pandemic came along, and there was a redefinition of objectives and metrics later on. And I just wanted to highlight this, both the initial objectives as well as those developed later had a series of agreed objectives, and there was flexibility in the process to adjust these. I just wanted to mention that. And I say this as an organization that receives the support and has to execute the project, right? Thank you. Thank you, Gabriel. Another question over here? No? Okay, here. Hello, good afternoon. I'm Angelica Costa from Tuitec. More than a question, it is a comment regarding the presentation made of the different organizations. I believe that the need for innovation and involving digitalization technology in an area like agriculture could be driven by organizations like yours, opening up spaces like the ones we heard of through Innovatech, where through leverages we can develop pilot projects that lead to concrete realities, tangible events. We were able to participate in projects like AgroFintech, organized by the Sportscasting Foundation also. And we had a concrete case where, as a program, there were a series of entities willing to develop pilots with companies like ours. In our case, we are an AgFintech. And in a given time frame, with cooperation resources, carry out a pilot with real growers, beneficiaries of credit, to measure the result of that combination between technology, sector, and agro. And for us, that is the way we opened up to Mexico, and we were able to take that same model to other entities. And today we are benefiting our growers through formal funding. So if we can structure programs that will turn the joint effort between businesses like ours and entities near the agro into reality, well, that will certainly have much better results providing this type of support and initiative. Thank you, Angelica. Another one over here. Comment? In line with what she was just saying, I do not remember your business, excuse me. But anyway, as an institution in Chile, we are working with the government to generate public policies. The state, up to a certain point, can develop public policies. We do so with family agriculture, for example, in 4 regions, with technology companies for irrigation purposes, with sensing and satellites. And basically, we were trying to provide advice to these growers. So through the institution, we were able to connect this, and the institution itself, in turn, based on the results, was generating public policies with a series of subsidies connected to it. So the question would be, through entities like yours, how can you collaborate to create public policies, enable public policies within states or channel through the existing infrastructure to speed things up when these organizations work together with the startups? So basically thinking about collaboration to produce something more stable over time. Have you examined that type of thing? Very interesting question. And yes, this is one of our pillars of action. That is part of digital information. Well, this is what validates. This varies, from country to country. In Chile, yes, their scaffolding is there to foster this effective collaboration. Let me tell you that while we were working with the telecommunications an organization to understand all the connectivity requirements in the country. And down another line, we are working with SUTERE, with regional governments, to identify all the digital transformation projects required to improve different elements regarding the quality of life, digital governance, productive sectors. We want to map and look at initiatives that may be of impact, and that is already linked. $80 million. So the invitation is to talk about this, explore these specific opportunities in given territories, and contribute, because in effect, public policies as such are also an element that can be funded through sectoral swaps, where from the development banking area, we can set a series of goals, and then based on that, you can make certain disbursements or generate different funds, and you mix that public policy with the projects under development. And what Angelica just mentioned, that comment about the pilot projects is very important, because it is important to test this and measure impacts. Multilateral banking has some restrictions to finance technological equipment, for example. But if we partner with other partners that can provide that part, we can contribute the other legs of the stool to contribute to close that circle between public policies, devices, and technological outreach. So this is a very interesting point, and that shows a case of successive coordination leading to more successful programs in turn. Down these same lines of what we are doing institutionally and is being replicated throughout the region, we have the technological hub, or SMRFI, as we call it, where we all converge all different types of businesses and different verticals, irrigation, fertilization, et cetera, and we bring them all together and try to have an ecosystem that is a big combination to turn it into a stronger structure where all parties converge, and institutions like us have the connections with the federations, with the growers. We have the reliability or the trust because we need to support the startups to give them as this space of validation. Who validates that? Well, within the countries. Who says this is good and this is not that good? They're not so good. Well, the good ones are the ones that have to work much harder to grow. So when we see the different systems in conversation and generating a coordinated structure, well, this can serve to connect all the different countries. And we can work with the startups in the different countries. And for example, in Chile, fruit, wine, well, we go to dairy and livestock. And then I talked to my colleague from Uruguay, and he says, I do not want to train more people in that area. So why don't we collaborate instead? So that is the collaboration from a broader stance that could be supported by a structure like yours. Could create these bonds and this ecosystem so that it is much more regional. And it will have an impact on the countries to generate public policies that can in turn support countries that are not as advanced, where they are missing something. And there is always something missing. In agriculture, we are all devoted to St. Thomas. So in this sense, they are thinking of this format and the structures as IDB or CAF. So how do you think we could develop such synergies? Okay, I will give it a step. I guess what I would like to say, and Eduardo explained this very clearly, multilaterals have instruments to foster public policy reforms. One big advantage we have is continuous dialogue with governments. And I think of you, the entrepreneurs, the AgTech startups, as I was showing you, remember that vessel guiding, that this is a small little boat guiding the big ship? You might help us identify those trends and to map what is happening. And the governments, the countries, sometimes it is very difficult for them. These are very large clusters to navigate through the new business trends. As an example, and I see the chair is empty, but Cafe developed the first agricultural NAMA many years ago with the IDB lab in funny, it was called Funda Cafe. After the experience of Cafe with that NAMA Cafe, the Costa Rican government developed a policy-based loan, as Eduardo was mentioning, for decarbonization and regulatory reforms to develop other agriculture NAMAs in areas of importance for the government of Costa Rica. What is important is to achieve that tacit knowledge of what is happening and identify those reforms required and how they those impact indicators are contributing. But very honestly, we trust in this new generation of startups for them to set the pace. Going back to your question, we are participating in exchange among countries, particularly in the area of health, digital governance, and education. With that structure I was mentioning about and a cross-cutting agenda for digital transformation, we can create perhaps a platform to generate those synergies. We are at a more micro step when we see the asymmetries within one same country. As remember, we were talking about coordination, but if there's an opportunity you see as well as ICA to generate that link, we would love to, because part of our action is linked to everything that may contribute to the integration of our countries. So if we generate those links for exchange, could see the best practices where one country has more bigger advantage over others, the cases of wine, agro versus livestock in others, as you were mentioning, that is a valid case, and perhaps we could think this at a broader level in areas like manufacturing and textiles, etc. These are very valuable. Mining also, a whole pool of projects and initiatives that could lead to major projects. Because what we oftentimes see is that when we start to invest in technology for a specific sector, well, what if those networks are used by other areas of society? We should think about that for integrated intervention and digital transformation efforts. And this could attract significant resources. So it would be very interesting to explore that. Let's talk about that. Very well, Gabriel. Well, in those cases where I do identify an indicator in the program that moves the indicator, well, what we have to do is jump into that case, all actors, to learn from that case. That is like the towboat that was pulling the cruise ship. So we have to keep an eye on all possibilities to make an effort, and remembering always that not everything can be extrapolated everywhere else. From one point to another, we need to adapt it and seeing what is most effective at the time of adapting it. William? Part of our role is to highlight this, show this off, display it. You are the ones that will work on those results. That is why I'm talking about knowledge and connection. Sometimes we have private sector or at the Assembly of Governors or our meeting in Bogota within 15 days, but we need to display this so that the different countries can make the public policy reforms as needed. Enrique? There is just one point here, and that is one of the benefits of having worked with tech companies linked to projects funded by IFAD. Precisely wanted to look for this connection, this influence over public policies. We cannot forget that projects with IFAD are executed by a government entity, a national government entity. So here we have the link directly with the government. And in the case, for example, of the work done with AgTechs, this is not just to have an impact, but supporting the public policies that already exist in the countries. In the case of AgTechs, the financial education providers, we worked a lot on supporting the national policy for financial inclusion, which seeks financial education as its main goal. So here we can influence. This was developed as a project that will impact 2,000 people, and now it is upscaling to a project to benefit 200,000 people, which have access to all credit programs of other institutions like BTA with lines of credit for different people. So that support to national policies is also very important, not just trying to influence and change, but also to help governments execute the policies, which otherwise would not have the resources for that. That is what I wanted to think. Thank you, Enrique. Well, I believe we have no further comments in the meeting room. If there are no further comments or questions, William, Eduardo, Enrique, before we wrap up, would you like to make some final comments or add anything? William? No, I was going to ask you something, but in the chat. No, I was going to ask if there was anyone in the chat that had a question. Now I understand. No, I do not see any questions in the chat. But anyway, as far as we are concerned, we understand the entrepreneurial journey many of you are undertaking. We know basically the limitations that arise in Latin America for this. But as I was mentioning from the IDB Lab colleagues, what we want to do is ensure that our countries can become the ground for entrepreneurialism. We have a diversity of products for that. And we would like to support you in that process. So in whatever we can, we are here at your service. Eduardo. I would basically copy paste what William said. We coincide very much in our role. Our doors are open. Let us talk about these things. Through ICA and the work done by Federico, headed by Federico, we can find many synergies. We need to build those bridges to continue working and where CAF with the private and the sovereign links on this, we have much to contribute and we would love to take advantage of these opportunities. A great pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you, Eduardo Enrique. I would like to thank you for the time given to us. I would also like to invite our colleagues from other organizations, other funding organizations, to seek synergies working together. What you are doing, what others are doing, can be complementary. And they can be a greater benefit to the people we want to reach. Thank you. Thank you, Enrique. Well then, I would also like to thank IFAD, CAF, and IDB Lab for this space and for having responded all the questions and comments that arose. Now, we will take a coffee break where we will have opportunity to continue doing a bit more of networking and then continue with the presentation of the different the other AgTechs for the day today. So thank you very much, and we will see you in a few minutes.
Hola, hola. Bueno,
Hello, welcome back. Let's do the last stretch. Okay, so I'll give the floor to my colleague Lisi, who will be in charge of moderating this last part of the day. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Alicia Alcantara. I'm part of the ICA's digitalization program. I'm from Brazil. That's why my accent. And so now we will have a chance to present the AgTechs digital solutions. And just like we did yesterday, each startup will have 10 minutes to present their solutions. And then we'll have a chance, a 5-minute period for Q&A and comments. The first speaker would be Marta Montoya from AgTools. Marta, the floor is yours. Adri, Ricardo, can we make sure that we can hear the video as well? Oh, Marta. See more, accomplish more. AgTools. Good afternoon. My name is Marta Montoya. So my name is Marta Montoya, and I'm the co-founder of AgTools. See more, accomplish more. We monitor world markets in real time so that the agri-food provision can generate profits, but we also avoid losses and waste, because what happens in the world affects every single producer worldwide. What Bloomberg is for business, Actus is for agri-food. So we give information to the supply chain to feed the world. The agri-food chain involves a number of stakeholders, and they all have different situations and variables that have to see that once they move, they will have an impact on the producer. And I want you to think about that. When a distributor or a buyer has something that will impact the producer, from the farms to the distribution centers, we lose 65,500 trucks worldwide that never arrived to their destination. The picture of the oranges is mine when the market drops and people just let the oranges to get lost, or when the markets are saturated. From the origin to the destination, the chain was broken before COVID-19, but after COVID-19, people realized about that, and that was part of the business. So a truck of tomatoes that were being dropped in Sinaloa not only loses what was not sent, but what happens in the field. For example, you lose 285,000 liters of water in a single truck of tomatoes. It can be used for something else or for our communities. What happens in the supply chain is that you usually have a linear thought that everything goes from A to B to C, but that's not the case. The supply chain starts with the farmer, the buyer, the distributor, the person in charge of the truck, and then they start looking at the price, the volume, the temperature in origin and in destination, how many trucks and boats arrive to the place where they cannot be unloaded, market terminals, holidays, how many times the trucks arrive to the destination, they cannot be unloaded because the country's on a holiday. So we have 76 identified variables that you need to know. And this means that all those in the supply chain do not know exactly what's going on every minute. And so the producer asked the processor asked the person in logistics, and the logistics asked the buyers, but nobody has the information. It's all anecdotes, and that is having an impact on 23 industries. It's not just the farm, it's the processing company, the port, the banks, the truck, and the insurance companies. So we did the TRIS theory, and we have 76 variables that the brain and those who have been in the industry sit down and start thinking about quickly. And they say, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. But the new generations do not have the training in these 76 variables. So we know that we won't be changing for the next 5, 15, 20 years. We need human beings in the supply chains, and they will have to communicate with each other. So we brought the solution, as you can see, the terminals, where we have in terminal 516 commodities of fruits, vegetables, herbs, flowers, and this includes coffee. We have 1 billion transactions per second because of the type of technology and language that we have. And from 114 countries, we have 8 billion records of 85,000, 114,000 sources, and we calculate the 101 variables of waste at the farm level. And we also have the request for world patents with IdeaShip Panasonic that did a really good research. I understand that our intelligence of how the supply chains work was something that can have a patent. So what we do is to find the data, digest it, clean them, organize them, purge them, audit every 15 minutes the data, give them a context because there's no such as artificial intelligence that does not depend on data. If we don't have good data, we won't be able to feed the models, and then we can visualize. And then we have the data here in actions, act tools, that everything happens very quickly, and it brings 50-year or 25-year information of temperature of commodities, so that whoever needs to make a decision can have, and I'm talking about seconds here, they can move and to make decisions from anytime. So the CEO, I've been in the industry developing agricultural programs worldwide in 40 countries. I started in telecommunications, and right now I'm moved to process and to produce. Then we have Gustavo, the CTO. He's a 213 engineer from Amazon. He's been in different industries. He built our own clouds and our servers. And Oscar, who is our CDS, he is a special engineer with machine learning and artificial intelligence, and we are all siblings. Our team is very robust because we understand deeply the industry. This industry is quite a deep one, it's very vertical. We also have the way to purge data, understand that metric tons in Russia are different from the metric tons in the US, understand the regulations between PROTUS and the Department of Justice, like the regulations we get in the US, and understand the science of data. And oftentimes in the world chain, we have worked for many different corporations, internally or externally. So what do? We gather all the data from many different organizations, governments, all the way down to the API, and we gather that with our own temperature technologies, phenology, information, our own calculators. But I understand them sometimes, but you have this many old days of lettuce will make the size of the lettuce. And also, it affects the size of the avocado. So we address this information to those who understand it. And then this means that we can help a small farmer or a big analyst. And we have the tech stack. The different levels of technology are quite complicated and complex. Well, I'm presenting this because we are a software company, and software companies have not been able to develop this. We are non-linear in terms of technology. And we have an interesting history. We have vegetables, fruits, coffee, tea, dairy products, protein from animals, sea protein, and others. So the size of the market, we are focused on the largest group of vegetables, Canada, Mexico, and the United States, and then moving down to Central America and Latin America in general. And then we have contracts up to 2026 in some cases. And some clients, like the largest supermarket chain in the world, we have self-service suppliers, the largest broccoli and producer, like Chipotle, the chain of farmer producers, European banks, associations with different universities and associations, and the largest telecommunications company in the Americas, which is American Mobile. And interestingly enough, we have all the regulations to work with the government of the US. And this is very important because we have to deal with cybersecurity and all the necessary permits to do business. So how do we make money? The small producer buys a membership that costs $5 to $50 a month. The medium-sized producer pays $199 or $59 a month. And the corporation associations, exporters, and consumer pay $499 a month. And the enterprises, the conglomerates, they would then need 20 memberships, 20 desks, different combinations. They go from $19,000 to $35,000. And so our line of products is quite wide. We have automatic report, dashboards, analyzer suites. So the launch that we have right now through American Mobile in the Americas. So who are our competitors? Yes, we all talk to each other, and that's a serious problem. We need to see data on time. Websites, they all comply with USDA, but the USDA is another data aggregator that has data systems, and they also make us feel a bit confused because of the farm surfers. And so now they can see in real time what they're buying against what's in the market, and they can also increase their income. And with that, I thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Marta. And now we have a chance for questions, an exchange of ideas. Any questions? I'm the director of Senas Argentina. How do you get the information from the governments? Let me give you an example. Like Spain, They used to have computer systems that then they turn off or leave there, and they buy new systems, they turn them off, leave them there. So for us to have information of how much lettuce is being produced by Spain, we need to go to three different APIs. And that's because we have called, we have sought, we have even traveled and talk to those in charge. I have a team of people who used to do that. I used to do that for my projects, but now they give us the API. So from we got data from 2008 and other data from 2018, and then the new data, and they all get integrated. Yes, but most states do not have the information online. That's why I'm asking you that. Yes, they do have it. They tell you they don't, but they do. I can assure you. And you have access to them? Yes, of course. Everybody has access to that because they're for taxpayers. Some are more complicated than others. And there's another client that I don't want to mention from one country that said he didn't have that, but he have it per hour. And now they got motivated so that they can improve their systems and their connections. And we have access to that, but anybody has access to that, not only to that, but to many other things. Thank you. With regards to phenology, that is something that we have gone university by university, commodity by commodity, because the temperatures of all the different products in our world are different and depending on the varieties, and they behave differently. So it's 2.5 years of gathering the data from each of the varieties of out of scientific documents to be able to find all the phenologies and be able to place them so that we can predict the future. Very well. Anything else? Yes, please go ahead. Thank you, Marta, for your presentation. It was quite interesting. Can you please explain? Well, it's clear to me what logistics and corporate use, but what would be the use for the small producer? What would be the decision to make? Well, we have a small watermelon producer that knows that when the market is dropping because they see that it's right now in $15, $14, 7 pesos for them to stop. And that 1 or 2 days makes a difference because they don't cut and they wait for the market to go up before cutting, or they start negotiating for processed instead of cutting it and putting in the cooler, which they cannot do much. For producers that are about to sow, well, in the case of Honduras, they started in 14% 3 years ago with yield. Now it's 40% because now they see when there are windows of opportunity in the market with some consultants, and they can say, hey, in these months, they are sold in $40 and the rest of the year $10. So we're going to plant so that we can ship when in the market it is in $40. So they change the way they sow and they cut or harvest. Yes, thank you very much. Very clear. Thank you. Congratulations. I have a question. I'm thinking in the small producer who is one of your customers and one of your users. How can the small producer find out about ag tools? Because usually small producers do not have smartphones or they use their smartphone for basic applications like WhatsApp, Facebook, Cops. How do they find out about ag tools and how can they have access to your platform and how do they make the payment? Yes, so first, producers wake up at 4 a.m. So the very first message they get is at 4 a.m. That's the first way to reach a producer. The behavior. They look, every producer will make calls or ask somebody to see what the situation is like, whether it's raining, what the market is like. So instead of that, they get that information using their cell phone. It can be via an SMS or WhatsApp. The market is, the temperatures are, the destination market is. So they can just do a web app. It's not an app because that takes a lot of information or minutes, but they take an SMS. Most of our customers in Central America and Mexico and the United States, they do have cell phones, smart cell phones. And we started working with them with SMSs and they've been working well. but it's a message that the first report they get is at 4 a.m., which is very important for consumers, for users, for producers.
Are there growers that are already digitally included? They have a smartphone and have access to the platform, and for the time being, that is our market. Yes, we work with core sellers, as we call them. Okay, thank you. Well, thank you very much, Marta, for your presentation. Our next speaker is Green Expo Lab. We have the two co-founders with us, Carlos Daito and Lauren Ibarra. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you. Can you hear me clearly? Yes? Okay, fine. Thank you. Well, first of all, good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation. I believe we are the youngest startup here. Less than 1 year in the marketplace. We are in Costa Rica. My name is Carlos Saito and Lauren Ibarra, who is here with me. Our activity, well, our main mission, to call it that way, is to digitalize agricultural activity to optimize fieldwork. That is sort of our mission. Next, please. This is a motivation slide, as I call it. This is information I received through LinkedIn. I checked it and I found it very interesting. I did not know this, but the territory of the Netherlands is 41,543 square kilometers, 0.6% of the fertile lands of the USA. But the Netherlands exports as much food as 60% of the USA. So just imagine, this is the third largest food exporter worldwide. Why? Why have they been able to do so? Precisely because they have digitalized the activity, as well as public policies in the country. And that gains relevance. Costa Rica is a country with 51,100 square kilometers, and that is its potential if we look at it on the same terms. We do not need to be such a large country to export food products and contribute to the world. Small countries, as we can see here, have that potential. And I was mentioning Costa Rica. That is the potential we see in Costa Rica. Next slide, please. The World Bank says that this activity will reduce poverty, increase revenue, and improve food security for 80% of the poor people in the world. Agricultural and livestock activities in Costa Rica represent 5% of the GDP, and over time, this activity is said to be ever more innovative, technified, and sustainable. Next, please. So here we see an opportunity to use remote monitoring technology to begin or continue with agriculture digitalization in the country. So with this, we can offer producers an application and evaluation plan to increase production and reduce costs associated to production. We also work, as Lord Kelvin said many years ago, what you do not measure, you cannot improve. Lord Kelvin said that. So with this, we created, we are in the process of creating a solution, and that is through remote monitoring imagery, satellites and drones. Gather information from the field, process, analyze it, and give the results, share the results with the producer. All these three steps, processing, analysis, and results, we want to do using our own web and mobile platform. And working hand in hand, delivering the results. Because, and I will explain why that part is so important in a moment. Go back one, please. Thank you. And data collection, well, this we do, or that is done by the producer himself. because we have possible clients who say, "Okay, I sent you the images. Can you process these?" And we have always said yes. So that is feasible. Next, please. Now, the benefits, multiple. I'm not going to mention each one, but just to highlight better risk management. Growers will be able to identify in a shorter time frame and more accurately where the damage is, where there could be anomalies happening, what could be happening, etc. There will be traceability that may help producers for certification purposes, as we heard yesterday when we were talking about blockchain and all those. And also, this information can help producers to lower input costs used in the field, because they will be able to determine more accurately where to apply, how much to apply, when to apply. And this information may be used also for bank loans and insurance policies. Oftentimes, growers do have no idea of how much land they are working on. So basically, my property goes from that tree over there in the corner up to the base of that hill. So you go and measure with precision, and you can tell whether this is 5, 6, or 7 hectares. Next, please. The market we've started to work with since last year is coffee growers. Right here in Costa Rica, those of you that know the Los Santos area, coffee covers about 2% of the Costa Rican territory, and we're already working with pineapple growers also. Costa Rica is the main pineapple producer worldwide, and covering 1.5% of the national territory, but we also want to work with multiple crops. We try to work with sugarcane growers, African palm, and others. So the market is potentially large, not only here in Costa Rica, but also in the entire Central American region, where this morning earlier we saw there were not major opportunities, not many AgTechs involved in Costa Rica or even in Central America and the Caribbean. And I believe we do have that potential. Next, please. Our advantages, how we stand out. Well, we are focused very much on what we do. We have more than 15 years in the remote monitoring industry, as well as data processing. The word lab in our name is not a sure whim. We focus on research and development, so much so that we have gained a research fund with the University of Costa Rica through drone imagery to identify coffee diseases. This is a fund funded by the University of Korea, and we have a cooperation agreement with eCafe. This has all become a reality in the last 4 or 5 months, and we are aligned with the development goals, and we believe it is very important to continue working down those lines. Thank you. Next, please. Now, we have Instagram, LinkedIn, websites. We participate in fairs, trade fairs throughout the country. With demos, we show growers how we can give them the products. We are part of the Procommer network here in Costa Rica. We have trade partnerships with companies that supplement the services we provide or that align with the services we provide. Next, please. Now, what do we offer? Well, our business model is focused on services particularly. That means to say that we go out to the field, or the images are sent to us, we process them, analyze them, and then we give the producer or grower results. And we don't leave it at that. We just give it to them as an image with a lot of colors. That is not fair. So we explain and we support that with an evaluation plan, and as much as possible with a spraying plan, studying each plant, what it needs, what it's missing, etc. And we have realized that there's a lot of training required, as we have been talking about over these days. Educate the market for us will be very important. And we are about to launch some courses, both private as well as in partnership with universities, to share this knowledge with producers, because oftentimes they know what a drone is or what an image is, but they have no idea of what to do with it. They do not understand the benefits they could extract from that. So that is where we want to teach the producers so that they can better understand what we can share, and they can hook on to the services we provide. So training for us is going to be very important. Next. Over the last 12 months, almost 1 year that we have been operating, we have flown, processed, and analyzed about 900 hectares in Costa Rica through research and development. We are about to publish a document covering the 10 first months of data and analysis for coffee in the Los Santos area here in Costa Rica. Very important coffee, export coffee growing image region. With satellite imagery, we had done supervised soil use classification at about 48,000 hectares. We do research and development, as I said. We have certain clients already here. We are growing. We are being made known, and that is very important for us. Next. Yours truly. I am Peruvian. I am not a Costa Rican. My wife, Lauren Ibarra, who is here, she is Colombian. We have been here for 1 year and 4 months ago in Costa Rica. And for the last year, we started our startup. We have a multidisciplinary team. We have an expert in geomatics who comes from Spain. And for field analysis, we have Lisbeth, Colombian. We have people from all over the world with us, as you can see. Our challenges for the next 6 months to 1 year, well, we want to sign more contracts, create more context. We are newcomers to the country, and we are making ourselves known gradually, which is so important. That is why we go on these trade fairs, and we meet the growers and producers. We are about to launch our platform. This platform I was mentioning, we are in the beta trials currently, and hopefully in the next 15 to 20 days, the platform will be a reality with which we will, with the platform, we will share results with the producers. And instead of having to share them through WhatsApp or a Google Drive or anything like that, they can have all our monitoring in a centralized place. We are internships with several universities here in Costa Rica. So 5 youngsters, interns will be joining the team and will help us develop our mobile application. And we want to develop more tools that will help the people out in the field based on the needs we have heard and the issues there, to help them overcome the issues they are facing. Next, please. And this would be all. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Carlos, for your presentation. We have time for 2 questions. Anyone? Yes, please. Okay. I would like to ask, who are you competing against in what you do? Well, here in Costa Rica, we have identified 3 or 4 companies that are doing the same thing we are. Particularly, they develop the applications with drones. They not necessarily focus on imagery or data analysis. And I must mention this, however. Oftentimes we have talked to producers and they say, oh, they already have this service, but all they got were images. The imagery was all these pretty colors, but never an explanation of what that meant. So this is where we have seen we need to stand out. We need to make that difference and tell the producers and growers, showing them what the benefits of this imagery is all about. And that is why we have tried to develop the evaluation plans and applications so that people can say, okay, I like this image. Now this will help me understand. So I have to go out to the field and do this and that and the other. So that is basically part of the competition here in Costa Rica. Thank you. I have a question. Very good, very interesting, Carlos. How do producers pay? Pay by use, monthly payment, services? How could you explain that part? Pay per use, what is it? Well, at the beginning, we started with a payment per hectare. We said, okay, how many hectares do you have? We will monitor per hectare, etc. Then we realized that not all producers have that many hectares, particularly the coffee producers. 5, 6, 7 hectares, maybe 2 or 3 only. So then we started another program with a series of plans. Okay, if we get a 50-hectare contract, we will give you a much better price per hectare. So those 50 hectares they can work on as they please. These 2 hectares for this month, or in the end, the rest other parts of the year, other times of the year. But we have to help these producers come in, enter and utilize these images, drone imagery, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you. Very well then, thank you. Is this shaded coffee here in Colombia? Oh, in Costa Rica. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Oh, in Peru. This is coffee and shade. How do you monitor this? Because the drone catches will basically project the image of the tree giving the shade, but not the coffee bushes themselves. Well, not all plantation is shaded. There are certain bushes under the trees, and the varieties that we are using do not need that much shade any longer. That on one hand, and also important is the time of the day we fly. We do not fly very early or very late because there's more shade over the crop. We usually fly between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. to reduce that shaded area. And then on the other hand, additionally, other techniques we are examining is that not necessarily the drone camera has to focus on the floor. It could be at a certain angle instead, and that allows you to see perhaps under the trees, to call it that way. We also work with imagery as well as with the cloud of points generated by these images to see those areas that perhaps are not seen through a single image. And there are plant indices that up to a certain point make that difference between the coffee bush and other trees or trees that are causing shade. So we see those little bushes under that tree. So we are looking for techniques precisely for that. No microphone, sorry. When you apply the index on the image, depending on the layer. So this is a multispectral camera. When you see the index as such, the image you see, it allows you to see the transparency under it. And this is where the indices work. Very well. Thank you very much, Carlos and Lauren. Now, our last presentation is Andrés Espinosa, Global Sales Director of E-Limited. Please. Okay, everything had worked so far very well, and all of a sudden, can you hear me? Okay, hello. I am Andrés Espinosa, the Global Sales Director of Ignitia, a Swedish company, but based in Ghana, Africa. Ignitia basically is a specialized service for tropical weather forecasting that arises from a need. I do not know if you know, but anyway, currently there are only 3 global weather forecast providers. All applications we have on our mobiles, weather and the television and radio forecasters, all of them purchase the information and the forecast from the same 3 providers. The problem is that the forecasts they provide do not perform very well in the tropics. So it is normal because these providers are the United States, the British, and the Europeans, and the forecast models are basically designed for temperate regions because that is where those countries are located. So when they provide information that is relevant for the tropics, that information was designed for a given region and later, post-work, is adjusted to the tropics. But any person that lives in the tropic, particularly any person that works in agriculture, will know that these are not necessarily useful or accurate. Excuse me for interrupting. We see the presentation a very small side. Did you zoom out on your computer? That is a bit better. Give me a chance. Otherwise, I can't see my notes, my cheat sheet. Oh, heavens. Oh, this is post-processing. This is a trade-off. If you want to see it is, no, this is fine. Well, anyway. Well, this, Inicia arose from the need to have a model specifically designed for the tropics. And therefore, Ignitia, since it is a weather forecast model for the tropics, that makes our forecasts, our information, be considerably much more accurate and saying what is going to happen and with greater resolution. As an example, in a global model, the resolution is 50 by 50 kilometers in the weather forecast area, and in the case of Ignitia, it is 7 by 7 kilometers. So we say we are farm specific. Very early in the life of Ignitia, we had to make a decision because weather forecast for the tropics can be used for many things. And that is why early within the company's life, we decided to use these forecasts specifically to help our producers, growers, to apply these only and exclusively for agriculture. And when we say this is a science-based company, basically it means that literally we have a team of scientists that are the origin and the guide of all the work done. The scientific research is the basis of the entire company. And when we say we are an impact-based, well, it means that the company, out of sheer conviction and also by mandate of the investors, has a stringent design philosophy based on technology users, human-centered design, as it is called. So this is a solution that we cannot deny. It is relevant for the entire world, but particularly relevant for the Latin America and the Caribbean. Whereas it says here, there is a very broad surface, many countries, that found many of their services on agriculture, and throughout the region, 14% of the population is employed in agriculture. That means 91 million people in this area directly involved in agriculture, and which nowadays have access to weather information that is really not all that useful for them, as we were saying. So we started with this idea of providing weather forecasts more accurate, more granular in the world. Here you can see our three main products: the 3-day, the 72-hour hourly, the weekly, the 7-day daily forecast. The 7 days with a resolution of 9 by 9, but it is really now down to 7 by 7. Very high resolution, in fact. A couple of comments, basically to put our technology in context. Ignicia is a company that 2 years ago went through an A round of funding that allowed it to rebuild its systems, not so much to provide services, but provide the services that to many more people. Two specific advances were: the first was the adoption of machine learning, which is relevant because what technology does in the Ignitia context is that when there is a forecast that was mistaken or not accurate, what the system itself does is verify it and compares it to what happened in reality, and it learns for that specific location. So it continuously improves. And the other comment I will make, which I believe is important, is that we have dedicated a lot of time and effort to undertake technical integration with telecommunications infrastructure providers to improve forecast resolution. I'm not going to dwell on this. I would not even try to describe the science behind our forecasts. But anyway, there is a difference in the fact that the forecast model, it was specifically created for the tropics, because as you can see, as compared to the other three global models, it is quite broader in its scope of application. But independently of this, and how happy we are that our forecasts are the most accurate in the tropics, we also realize that weather forecasts in general are seen as a commodity. Growers have many other things to think about, and obviously they are not going to start thinking whether the forecast coming from Ignitia is 50% more accurate than that provided by any other provider. So the decision then was to go one step beyond and not only become a tropical weather forecast provider, but also a developer of solutions for farmers. And when we say farmers, we mean specifically two types of users. Fundamentally, smallholders, those that work on less than 2 hectares, and the industrial farmers that are a group of growers or a grower or group of growers that together have something a bit over 100 hectares. And what we try to do is, well, this is the first time I give this presentation in Spanish, but it came to mind that in Spanish we talk about weather and climate as if they were the same thing. But what Ignicia tries to do is help producers, giving them weather information so as to improve the timing of their activities. We have several tools, but we focus on helping farmers or growers improve the timing or at the critical points in time, basically at sowing, spraying, applications, spraying, harvesting, etc. So we are in the business of improving timing, I guess. And I have some good news. End of the story. Now, let me tell you what we sell. We sell two things. We sell the daily weather forecast. Today it will rain, not tomorrow. And we sell what we call the Smart Climate Advisory, which in turn is divided in two types. Intelligence that is basically weather focused, and the other one that has to do with the agro side. And those products, those two products we have, are distributed through any channel, depending on the context and depending on the user needs. The information or content we produce is distributed through whatever means is most convenient. We have realized that there are different contexts, but also different users, and each one has their preferences. In general, as rule of thumb, the smallholders that work in rural areas, be it in Africa or in Brazil, as rule of thumb, prefers SMS, and some that do not know how to read would rather call a telephone number and have a person in their native language or their local language explain to them the contents produced. Or it could be an application in Brazil. We do this through WhatsApp, for example. It could be if the client is a one that has their own platform, they use their own API. Others say, okay, I want a dashboard. We can provide that too, with a certain degree of customization. But anyway, what is important here is to say how our service is structured. Information is streamlined. It is in movement. It lives in a lake of data and is distributed through whatever channel without the need for any further changes. The model we want to reach is to pay one single subscription, and then the user can decide and change or alternate among different types or channels.
Here, just for you to get an idea, it's kind of hard to describe the products that we have. This is just a graphic example of how you can see what they look like. Obviously, here we don't have the SMS, but all of them are smartphones. But a good part of our customers do not have smartphones, so they only use SMS messages, and that's okay. Here we're talking about digitalization of agriculture, but we believe that digitalization entails distributing this information in the best way possible, and it's not mandatory for producers to adopt a certain digital technology. So I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of companies who have supplemented and innovated their business model with our technology. For example, we have the case of a seed company in Africa. The way they operate is that they give the seeds as credit, and at the end, the producer pays the credit. So of course, they have an interest. They're interested in the producer to have a good performance, because the better the performance, the greater the chance that they are going to get paid. So they take the cost of our service as one of their operational costs, and they hand this package of seeds together with our services. So they've been having problems like them sowing the seed and having it rain for the next day. So that's one of the things we do. Another successful case would be similar. This is a company that sells fertilizers. And they say, hey, for me, this is not just something that is of interest in order to improve and diversify the value of my products, but also as a marketing tool. So they say, I'll pay for your SMSs. I'll give that subscription together with my fertilizer, but then the farmer gets a message at the right time that says, today is a good day to apply the fertilizer of this brand in your field. So they see this as a business in that sense. And as I was saying, we are an impact company, so this is not a minor thing. It is key to the way we operate. And we make sure the impact of our technology constantly. These are the outcomes of a relatively new project or recent project. This is, I believe, from a fertilizer company where the impact to having access to the information had. So most users reported improvements in yield and the volume of the crop or the harvest. They found the service to be useful. They found that they were satisfied and were open to pay for the service. And so are willing to pay for the service. And so we are more than happy to be able to help producers in this way. And let me conclude by saying that, as I was saying before, in Africa, we have about 3 million users that get our content. In Brazil, we also have been in operations for about 3 years. In Brazil, we have focused on agro businesses and corporate businesses, but we are also now talking with telecommunication companies so that we can also distribute the information this way as well. So with that, I stop. Thank you. So I'm gonna open the floor for questions. Hello, Andres. One question is, can you give us an idea of the costs that a farmer would have to pay in this area? Well, in this area, I wouldn't know. The lowest basic cost that is usually something we use is the SMS cost. And it depends on each country's fees or rates. But in general, in Africa, with certain variations, we are talking about 15 cents of a dollar per message. And the farmer can choose how frequently or how often they receive the messages. So these subscriptions can be weekly, monthly, annual, quarterly. So the idea there is to adapt to what the person wants. And this is a multi-channel in ways, in forms of payment. Many people pay through minutes. And here in Brazil, I know we have pixels. So it's open to different forms of payment. Please use the microphone. In the case of Costa Rica, where it rains a lot, you have some free sample, maybe a 7-day, 2-week trial period to see if it works. We could do it. We have not done that. Generally, because we always have to associate with somebody, be it with the telecommunications company or corporation. So there's always somebody we need to associate with. And that person is the one who is asking for the validation of the model from the scientific standpoint, but also of the forecasts. So we always have a trial period before providing the service. So I don't think that will be a problem. For example, in Africa, together with the organizations for cooperation and development, usually they would pay for the service and then it was given for free to the farmer to generate that trust. Hello, Andres. Very good presentation. Thank you. I'm Alfonso from Uruguay. I think your precision data were very good. And compared to the other three, as well as the other three providers, I wanted to see if you had data from other regions, like the temperate region, and if it's possible to expand to other regions, which is not the middle one, different from the middle one. Yes, we have taken that into consideration. It's part of the plan, but in temperate regions, we lose. They get closer. The difference is not as close, and so certainty is not as good. So there we would have to start competing with a different strategy that is like, well, I have these other products that are specifically for farmers. But we're starting where we have the biggest comparative advantage. And last one, we have a question in the chat by Cachi Rojas, who's joining us online. Kathy asked for the implementation of this intelligence in terms of vigilance and surveillance. To what extent can your products create an interoperability? That is, to link with satellite images, the public health surveillance programs. Well, that's a very specific niche. I think that's something that we'd have to ask to the engineers at Initia first, but to begin with, I don't think that'll be a problem. All of our information in forecasts and the historic information that we have is available for it to be used in any type of platform that can connect to an IPL. So with businesses that have a certain need to protect their intellectual property, they have asked this type of thing in order to just double check what they are doing. So I think it would be feasible. Very well. That's the end of this blog then. Thank you for all the presentations, for sharing your work with us. And now I'm going to give the floor to Federico Bert for the takeaways and closing remarks. Well, I know that the day was a quite long one, but I think it's been a very fruitful one. We wanted to ask you to please give us some takeaways in order to rescue some of the most important messages that were given today. And this will help us to draft the document that we'll be releasing at the end of the week. So, my suggestion would be to look at what we have done today from above, from not look at the details to who said what, but the general impressions or general key messages that you are taking home with you, especially in terms of financing, and with the same objective that we had yesterday morning. Everything that can be done and recommended to foster digitalization. I don't know if anybody raised her hand. Matias, go ahead. I don't have a definition, but I have some food for thought. Out of everything we talked about, I realized that this is a network of interests that are multiple for different cases. There are different complexities, different needs to be able to differentiate products for different countries. So there are many interests, many players. We have some that gather producers, others that try to finance plans for change with producers, others with startups. And so we all have to play the game of how to get organized, understanding better how these chains may align themselves. And I believe this to be a challenge. And it is something we can tackle if we all have a mindset of collaboration, to be open minded, to have an open model, and to be able to work as a network. We need to see how we improve it. As I listen to IDB and CAF and how they finance startups, but we also have the part of funding for projects and trying to articulate all this, we can generate more synergies at a greater scale if we manage to communicate better. That's just what I'm taking home from today. Yes, thank you. Hello. Well, let me tell you about our experience as we participated in pilot projects. I think that helps, as some mentioned this morning. Going back to Matias' remarks, if CAF and IDB takes those $500 million and then not put them in just one fund, because then you have to do the due diligence and all the paperwork. But if you do well, you get finance, but then you have to give part of your company to for this to happen. So maybe you can invest that in the entire ecosystem, financing pilot projects. And in the end, that's where you are financing different parts. You are giving money to the startups for them to work. You are including small producers, associations that are part of the ecosystem for them to get benefited as well. And so this is better than just have the money all allocated in one single fund for others to apply. That may actually make the ecosystem much more dynamic. That will make things happen and to have some tangible, real cases for connection in the real world. It's like seeing it from different standpoints and not just one from one or the other. We, as I said before, we have worked in some of these pilot projects and the results or the outcomes are very good. So that might be something for success. Thank you, Matias. Thank you, Antonella. That would be great if we were to have a number of great ideas for CAF, IDB. That would be awesome. I don't want to give any pressure, put any pressure on Eduardo. Antonella. Well, no. A takeaway from this morning's sessions and this afternoon panel as well is the margin for growth, the possibility for financing, which is growing, the possibility to have more startups, particularly in Central America and other countries that, and I had no idea, like the one I had for South America, and the same happens for South America. The likelihood or the possibility for growth is big, and it's not as well known in those ecosystems. I know that in the province of Santa Fe, that's where we're located, we have SF 500 in Santa Fe. Would like to foster 500 startups. They have funds for that. And I believe that this space, this type of spaces are welcome and should happen more often to level up this type of information and proposals and be able to hear what's happening on the other side, what needs are in the other end. Because oftentimes the tensions of different organizations and funds and banks are there, but the needs for development and the ideas and the knowledge are there too. And so I believe meeting those two important, and this type of spaces are valuable because they accomplish that. And something else that was said is the importance of teams and the human value and the value of connections, because we're always thinking about technology, but we also have to think about human relations. And that is something that was mentioned by Tomas Peña, and that's something that we need to keep it at 66%. I wrote down the number because I thought it was an interesting figure. 66% of startups lack the right human resources and fail because of that. And that's something we need to then pay attention in our organizations and try to accompany the startups as they grow, because an entrepreneur might not know how much they can scale up their business. And from being 10 people to 60 people, that might be complicated. And that's something we need to keep in mind. Sorry, I took too long. Sorry. Thank you, Antonella. Thank you. I have Gabriel and Jaime. I think it was very useful to see how they map the different players behind the investment processes, not only the startup that is going to request funds to these actors or players, but for the players know how they can articulate themselves in a smart way and develop startups in a much better way. For them not to overlap or duplicate efforts, I think there's a margin for improvement in that sense too. Thank you, Jaime. Thank you, Federico. I think that today we saw an ABC from one of the funds of what a startup should be. I think that via ICA, we should develop some mentorships to scale up each of the stages and develop some sort of guideline that might help us all in this network that we are creating. Thank you, Jaime. Hernan. Thank you, Jaime. I like your idea. And I would take that to something else that was mentioned this morning. I believe it was Miriam, of something concrete that can be established. It has to do with education from high school up, linking that to what Jaime just said. Extension training or outreach and training, that would be great for small, smart startup and young startups. Thank you, Hernan. Anybody else? Any comments? Go ahead, Adriana. Yes, I think it's something related to what Adnan mentioned just now, the training, the education of people. I believe that everything can be summarized from my perspective in owning the knowledge, ownership of knowledge. I believe, and I insist on this, and I apologize if I'm too passionate about it or intense, but it's not only the producers or those who benefit in each company that have to learn about technology, but we need to learn from them and from ourselves. Because as Matthias was saying, we oftentimes tend to be very selfish. We lack empathy. Maybe we can need to think and start listening to each other instead of being in the defensive and see how we build the network because each of us can give our 2 cents. And even though it may seem like an NGO, it's the reality. And we talk about big data and artificial intelligence. And within artificial intelligence, some of the algorithms have been based on biometrics and how animals behave. And oftentimes, ants have that collective intelligence, not because one has a huge brain, but because they build this intelligent network. So, why is it so hard for us? I believe that it's hard for us to work together and we see what the other one has and how I can do it better instead of trying to bringing all this together so that we can all give our 2 cents and we're all unique. And there's enough room for everybody. So let's not be afraid to integrate ideas and support each other to build this AgTech network. And not only an AgTech network, but also everybody who interacts in the value chain, which is huge. And the whole system is very complex. So the idea is to put all these topics together with much willingness and desire to do this and be happy about what we do because we may lose this happiness just because we're competing. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Thank you, Oriana. That's good. David? Now, thinking about what you were talking about education, what you were saying about education, we are here trying to do something for agriculture and particularly digital agriculture. But the main challenge is how can we convince future generations to find an opportunity in working or to having a business in the field. So it's not only about having an entrepreneurship program, but showing them that there are opportunities in the field for them to be businessmen. So in this sense, we may have some initiatives, and we were talking with a university that tried to develop a program on digital agriculture engineering. So how can we form these agronomists, these engineers, and in the end, were not able to leave that digital name there. But since things have changed so much from education, from the academia, we can show people that there's another way to see agriculture and that there are opportunities there also to have businesses and not just in a generic manner. because the main challenge is precisely that for all of us, all of those who come after us can see that and then understand how important it is. Thank you, David. Thank you. One more comment with regards to that. Something that happened recently to me. I graduated as an agronomist in the Argentinian Catholic University. And very recently, I met students from UCA, which is a quite prestigious university. Argentina has a very good university education level. And we were invited to present a lecture on what this issue of digital agriculture is. I don't know if they already have a specific subject on that, but that caught my attention because I think that's something that may be missing. And that's where future agronomists are being formed. And that there's a willingness and a demand for it. Yes, definitely. I remember I was getting graduated. When I was graduating, I wanted to do everything and I felt like Superman. But it's interesting that there's no subject that has to do with agricultural entrepreneurship or something. That would be great. Juan Matias, something short. Guadalupe from Uruguay. I believe it's okay that there's some things that are missing, but I believe that what we're missing is socialization of things that already exist. I believe there are many things in Latin America and the Caribbean that have not been socialized enough as enough for others to other countries and even between within the countries might hear about them. So there are many observatories for digital technologies in many countries. And tomorrow we're going to be talking about INEA Chile and where ECLAC has a project where ECLAC is trying to set up an observatory. But there are many institutes and organizations that have this type of things, but they may have some sort of bias. Argentina has some, Uruguay has others. So it might be a good idea to unify this information so that we can socialize all the different startups, all the different chances for education that exist in all countries, all the financing sources available for startups and other institutions, and try to centralize that information all together someplace. Obviously, this is something that should be done by an international organization, be it ICA, ICLAC. That might be a very useful tool. Thank you, Wada. Matias, Marta, and that'll be it. Let me try to be as concrete as possible. All these transformation processes that are available now, like with different business models, like Uber, have have the problem that startups may die very quickly while they're still in their diapers, for example. But that's something that is going on, and the transformation that may be robust and fast are being accomplished with people who do well and others who don't do so well. And with regards to pilot projects mentioned by David, it would be nice to aim capital towards startups, but also try to generate more tests. There are a number of pilots that won't work. There are many pilots that won't be something that we can scale up, like the ones doing here in ICA's laboratory. We have a robot that can apply in 2 square meters. Everything that is automated, that's probably not something that we can scale up, but it's a first step to see what can be done in the future. Maybe you can put some wheels into it, and then it can just go around in the field. But if it's something that we cannot scale up, at least we get some learnings from it and finance startups that generate revenue do not necessarily with equity from companies might not be as strong because there's some learning that we're not getting from how we can give value to the producer faster. It's like we need to put the money closer to the producer so we can learn faster from them and from their end to see how we can bring value to them. Since they talked to access to capital during the day, I think we have a very important opportunity. The Hispanic in the US is an economy that is growing fast. It is the seventh country in the world. It's a common economy on its own, and it's growing fast. So it would be interesting for ICA and for organizations to start talking to our Hispanic populations, because many of our Hispanic populations do not have the chance to invest in the US, but maybe they can invest in our groups. I'm here because I'm a person who migrated there. I'm learning and I'm coming back to the Americas. I'm coming back to Latin America. And there are many like me in California, from El Salvador, Honduras, and Mexicans who have been in the industry or who are in the world of technology. And maybe it's a place where we can talk for us to bring more funds. And I'm looking at you because there are enough Hispanics with the information. And maybe we have not talked to all of us. And I know some groups in general, so it might be a good idea to do this diaspora. So to get connected and take care of our own home, the Americas. Thank you, Marta. Thank you. Perfect. Let's finish here. It's 5:30. And just to reply to Guadalupe, with regards to some room to manage information, at ICA, we have the Observatory of Public Policies, and there's also space for digital transformation where we are uploading many of the initiatives, political frameworks, financing sources in all Latin America. Of course, it's still under development, but the idea is for it to be a space where you can find different initiatives from all countries in a single place. Well, so let's conclude for today. We have some good news and not so good news. The good is that maybe tomorrow's agenda may be a bit lighter. Today was quite intense. But the bad thing is that we're going to be starting sooner, earlier tomorrow. So the bus will be leaving at 7:45 from the hotel. Yes, because tomorrow we're starting at 8:30. We might not have as many activities all put together, but we do have some group work. Some of us will stay here, others will go to the Argentina room, which is close to where we have lunch, because we will be, and we have Guadalupe and Stanley, and we're going to have more people connected, generating a dialogue between the INEAs, INTAs, public institutions, and BRAPAs of the region, what they're doing, how we can collaborate. So this would be more a kind of exchange. And we hope it's going to be quite dynamic. And that will reduce the level of intensity a bit. And the other thing is that we sent you via email a short survey questionnaire. You'll take 5 to 6 minutes to fill it out. But we believe it's going to be useful. And we sent it to other AgTechs that applied and that are not here, and some that applied last year. That is going to be some input for tomorrow's afternoon discussion. So if you can complete it, please, we can gather information that may help us for presentations in the future, so we can put some figures to some things that right now are unknown and that we need to quantify somehow. Okay, thank you all. Thank you for your